To the third and final talk in our series that we put on as CIS in conjunction with the Indigenous office. Today we have Robbie Thorpe speaking to us. Robbie, I actually first met Robbie last couple of weeks ago on the Hawkfield balcony with Gary. He's made a Gary Follows. He's been involved in the Tent Embassy and Indigenous struggles for the past
40 years.
40 years, yeah.
Since the Tent Embassy, when he was just 16 years old, it's been his path since then. And yeah, been involved in heaps of campaigns and legal challenges to violations of Indigenous rights and human rights.
A quick interesting story about Robbie that he told me a couple of weeks ago. He used to call him Chinum back in the day when he was running around with Gary at Monash. He was a bit of a boxer, and Chinum was where he hit them on, touched them up on the chin if they gave him any grief. So yeah, looking forward to an interesting fiery talk today.
We were particularly interested to hear about the campaign that he was running just, 2006 for the Commonwealth Games in Melbourne? Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. Looking at, it was called the GSC campaign, so looking at the issues of genocide, sovereignty and treaty, which are three things that really aren't spoken about a lot in the mainstream media or by politicians, but they're really central to what the Aboriginal community feels needs to be dealt with today. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, James and Beth, and thanks to the students out here at Monash who have got an interest in Indigenous affairs and obviously studying those things. Good on this, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk. My name is Jiran Bunjalini, Buran Mundundra. Pratam, Watwaram. That's my name and address. But I'll leave that language there because no one understands it. Which is unfortunate. There is many languages on this planet, but they're ancient languages too, not just dialects, they're languages. Ancient. Probably got one or two die off each year. I'll get the reasons why. Australia's a crime scene, let me tell you that to begin with. If it wasn't for the acts or the premeditated criminal act of genocide, sustained act of terror, repression, suppression and oppression, you wouldn't have a thing called Australia. That's what it's premised on. There's no consent to occupy this land, no treaty, and as a result there's no jurisdiction that applies to our people or this land. It's an imposed colonisers' law, and as a result of that fact, there's no treaty. Everybody in this country here today is living on the proceeds of crime, and they're the beneficiaries of this crime. Australia's in a deep state of denial when it comes to the rights of the original people of this land. I don't like using the word Aboriginal. It's a colonisers' tag. Australia's a continent with many nations on it. It's bigger than Europe. And you know there's many nations there with their own individual sovereignties there. Well, the same applies there. We're not just all one big black mob here in this country. We're very distinct and unique. In 1770, I want to go back. I want to take this picture of why I'm involved with the Tent Embassy, why I'm involved with Camp Sovereignty, why I'm involved with High Court challenges in terms of the jurisdiction, and why Australia's guilty of war crimes against our people. I'll tell you why. In 1763, this country here was known as New Holland. It was one of the territories of the Dutch. Right? Britain declared war on the Dutch in 1763 and all of its territories. Now, some people say that Lieutenant Cook discovered this country. It was already called New Holland. Now, I don't understand. They were the Europeans, the British were the ones who discovered it, and it was already called New Holland. So there's a lie there to begin with. Australia's just one big lie. Lies, deceit, propaganda and indoctrination. When Cook came here, he had a bloke called Joseph Banks with him. And he was a botanist. He was also a biologist. And he brought vials of smallpox with him, vial potions, genocide notions. They say that Joseph Banks is the father of Australia. Some people call it. But he delivered a weapon of mass destruction in a preemptive strike on innocent people. Sound familiar, people? Sounds like what they're talking about today in places like Iraq, Afghanistan and other places in the world. Preemptive strike, weapons of mass destruction. Undeclared war, secret invasion, intent to destroy the original nation. Australia's a crime scene. It's a criminal nation. We want a crime scene investigation. Terror analysis is a legal fiction. It means you haven't got consent, you haven't got jurisdiction. But despite that, Aboriginal people fill the jails in this country today. I mean, the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Our children are criminalised by the police. They're profiled. They're targeted. They're criminalised before they ever get a chance. And that's just one of the problems that our young people face in this country. More likely they've come from an Aboriginal reserve. And a reserve is a concentration camp. Euphemistically called mission stations. But they're concentration camps. And people were rounded up in this country as survivors of the smallpox Holocaust, which decimated the people here. Whoever survived that ended up in a concentration camp. Well, prior to that, there was the killing times where people were massacred. There's probably more massacre sites in this country than what there is days of the year. So if Aboriginal people were to commemorate every massacre, remember our fallen, who were defending this land against invasion, well, we'd be in a constant state of mourning. Just remembering people who tried to defend this land from invasion. Nobody knows the history here. That's why it seems like this is so important. I can't understand why in this country, despite the fact that Aboriginal people are probably the most researched and studied people on the face of the earth, nobody seems to know nothing about the real history of the place. What's going on? Got to ask yourself. Maybe because people don't want to admit that they're criminal genocides and they're living on the proceeds of crime. What's the problem? They're in denial. They can't deal with it. Until they deal with that issue and get a treaty, there's Cook's instructions, if you want to go back through what Cook's specific legal instructions were, we'll get consent and to negotiate for convenient situations in the land. Somewhere along the track they said that this is an empty land, a terra nullius, an empty land. And they went about making it that way. So terra nullius is a criminal act. It's an intent to destroy our people. It's a genocidal act. Be clear. I'm just a little bit puffed out because I've just ridden from Huntingdale railway station. I nearly missed the train as well, so I was a little bit flustered. A little bit flustered.
Do you need a drink?
Wouldn't mind a drink, yeah. Well, until there's a treaty in this country, it'll remain a crime scene, an illegal occupation, and nothing but imposed colonisers' law. You know, even though they called this empty of people, they made a lot of laws for our people. Go back through the history of legislation for Aboriginal people. There's thousands of pieces of legislation that apply to our people specifically. When we were put on reservations, that was the beginning of the apartheid laws in this country. Australia pioneered the idea of apartheid. It was back in the 18th century when they rounded up the Tasmanian Aboriginal people and put them on the islands in Bass Strait. That was the beginnings of apartheid law. It was later adopted by South Africa in about 1950. And you can see the effects that those laws had on those people at that time. I'm just trying to paint a picture of how disgusting and vile and despicable this country is. Completely denied the human rights of the original people. And they butchered our people. These great heroes, these colonising pioneers of the past, the Angus Macmillans of the world, the Major Mitchells. Angus Macmillan has now got a federal electorate named after him. The federal seat of Gippsland is named after Angus Macmillan. Our people know him as the Butcher of Gippsland. He murdered him and others, including the native police forces and posse, basically. They rode around Gippsland and other places and shot out the remaining blacks. About 1840, they declared this country the land of milk and honey, and it was open for sale. So all the Scotch came in. But this country was being sold overseas before this itself as well. Australia was a corporate-backed military operation going back to 1770. It was the corporate wealth of England at the time that supported the military. It's probably still the most expensive military campaign Britain's ever undertaken. It was a pretty big gamble, but at the time, Industrial Revolution, they were losing the war of independence in America, which they'd seen and was going to cost them dearly. Where would England have been if they hadn't invaded Australia back in 1770? Nothing. Our people have been paying for that place for the last 240 years. Their blood and our resources being extracted from this place. That's what it's all about, people. This land was invaded. This greed motivated it. Power, control, and global domination. And that's what they've been doing. In Victoria, we suffered the effects of mining in the early days. People might remember the gold rush here, which made the state of Victoria one of the richest places in the world at that time. And people, all sorts of desperados fought for this place at that time. And that's what we had to live with. Victoria was the first place to adopt the idea of Paranopolis. It was constituted on that basis. About 1850, the Aboriginal people of Victoria were on their knees. We were on the verge of extinction. And they rid us off. So they constituted on the basis of this being a terra nullius. So the crime happened here in Victoria, not on Mer Island, where Eddie Marbo lives, which is a Melanesian culture. It's a stone's throw away from New Guinea. The lawyers who did Marbo came from Collinsville. Ryan Keane and Ron Caston, who'd worked in the Aboriginal community, the Aboriginal legal service, were well aware of the issues of sovereignty. And we made the point about terra nullius being an issue here. It was such an issue that they schemed the removal of terra nullius, those two lawyers, with Eddie Marbo. I don't think Eddie Marbo was aware of what was going on, but that he was used. I respect that. If you have a look at the native title legislation, there's no mention of customary law in it. And that's what the problem with native title is. That's why I've got all this division trouble involved with this. It's no recognition for the law of this land. Probably recognised as the oldest law on this planet. We're a socially organised society. We have been for hundreds of thousands of years for these barbarians to end up. The British Crown Pirate Corporation, who had the intent to destroy us. It's still the case. Until I see a treaty there which has got international scrutiny, properly set out as international law, this country for me will remain a crime scene. And everybody is a beneficiary of this. No matter which way you look at it, no matter what those people say and what they do, unless they deal with the original people's land in a proper legal manner, it'll remain that way. When I was 16, I was taken to the embassy by a man who was the first man to graduate from university in this country as an Aboriginal man. They say Charlie Perkins was the first Aboriginal man to graduate. Very close between a man who graduated out of this university here, Monash. His name was Bruce McGinnis, the late Dr. Bruce McGinnis. He was my elder. So check him out, find out who this man is. He was a great elder for our people. He led our people from about 1970s. He was involved with the embassy, Black Power movement, community-controlled organisations. He was a great leader, unrecognised, very much. But he came out of this university here, he passed through in record time, and he got honours in everything that he done. So, you know, average people are quite capable of learning all this training. Our people are very intelligent people. We're being denied opportunities. And there's reasons. They don't want to be educated, asking questions about our rights in this country and the crimes that are being committed on us. Australians made one mistake, or the Europeans made one mistake when they come to this country. When you commit genocide, make sure you kill everybody. Otherwise, you're going to pay for it. And that's what's going to happen now. You haven't got treaty, you haven't got consent, you've got no jurisdiction over our people. We want you people to stand up. If you recognise our human rights, because it's tied up with yours, if you recognise our human rights, you stand up behind us. So anyone can pull down this illegal, racist, colonial, imperialist system here. It's the Aboriginal people. We have a legal right and a just cause. We've just got no support for it. Because everyone is living on the proceeds of crime, they've got vested interests. You know, all tied up in maintaining the status quo. So it's, the average people are about 1% of the population. It's very difficult. Of that 1%, we've probably got 1% of the people who are active. Very similar to the white community. How many people are active in the white community? A very similar figure. So, you know, the odds are stacked against Aboriginal people in terms of liberating ourselves and making change here. And we rely a lot on the conscience of the wider community to support us. And I think they're obliged to. They've got an obligation to support us. If you want to justify the occupation of this sacred land here, you know nothing about, you'll do it. Don't you want to learn anything about the other million years of history of this land? We just want to go with the last 200 years. You know, missing out really bad. Because we have a lot of knowledge out there. And we're prepared to share. We're a sharing, caring-based culture. That, there's 600 nations here living in harmony. How do you do that? Not only with the people we're living in harmony, we're living in harmony with the environment. We were a sustainable society, a sustainable world. As far as we're concerned, we're far superior than this backward dark age shit that we have been forced to live with now. You know? Whereas a small group of people control everything and got all the wealth. It doesn't work in our world. You know? There's no elevated rank amongst our people. The only people who've got an elevated rank are elders when they sit in council. And they're lawmakers. That's proper lawmaking business. At the same time, they're in an elevated position. Otherwise, everyone's equal. We had an amazing system that worked. There was recognition of women and their own power. Men and elders and children. They all had their places here and their own legal power, or they had their own council power. So everyone was taken care of. So we want to go back there. You know? We want non-Aboriginal people to pay the 240 years back rent, you know, compound interest on that. It's damages and a war crimes commission. And sign in. When people talk about this treaty business around here, all these other, you know, American, all these treaties, the Treaty of Australia is going to be different. You know why it's going to be different? Because the black fella's going to write it and the white fella's going to sign it. That's a contractual arrangement for the occupation of this land. If you did that, you can even do that as an individual. You can come and treaty with the people whose land you're living on. That gives you an argument in these courts. You can say, no, I'm subject to this law. No, subject to the boat law. And it is a boat law. I don't know if anyone's been to court here. I'm sure a couple would. When you go into court, you stand in the dock. Underneath is the brig. It's modelled on a boat. You know why? Because what you operate on here is admiralty law. The law of the sea. Boat people, right? They're all boat people. And they're still on their boat. What needs to happen? Get off the boat. Get off the boat. Come to our customs. Learn a little bit about where you're stepping here. We don't want you walking all over our grave sites and damaging our sacred business. When you go from someone's border, you go through customs, don't you? Or as a white man so superior, he brings his own law and all this crap with him. Since he said, I've got a right to do that. No. You've got to get off the boat and come through our customs. And then you can be a part of this country. Rather than be a stray alien. What a name. What sort of name is a stray alien? Are you all stray aliens, are you? Well, I thought. Well, it's an opportunity. Get off the boat. Come through the customs. Well, don't you think we're human enough? We've got no rights. So this whole country's been based on that fact that we don't exist and we've got no rights anyway as human beings. The whole country's based on that. Everybody here is high pops. I didn't want to mention that lady being murdered in Boston because it's a horrendous thing that happened there. But that's what Aboriginal women and children face for the last 240 years in this country. This country is based on murder, rape and theft. And boys. And they butchered the men. Now this is the mindset that's been created here. Doesn't surprise me that those sorts of things happen. You know, where is the 30,000 people in the street marching when the state murders our people in jail? And that happens on a regular basis in this country. In fact, there's been more people dying in custody since the Royal Commission into deaths in custody. The jail rate's gone through the roof. There's been no justice for our people. And you know what happens when you keep denying people their human rights, don't you? Something's going to happen. And in this country, it's only got itself to blame. Your denialism is not going to help. Your ignorance is not going to help. Right? But there's a thing called the internet now. You can access the information, look for yourself. So you can find a treaty, so you can find consent. Well, it's a pretty important issue, consent, isn't it? I'll direct that one to the written. Is consent an issue? Well, why isn't it an issue for the original people of this land? Okay. It's got to be a part of the legal history of this country, getting consent to occupy our land. Okay. I'm not impressed with colonisation and all this garbage that you've created here. I would much prefer to have it the way it was. It was a beautiful country. In Victoria, I say it's got the worst carbon footprint in the world. It means the most filthy people on earth live in Victoria. We've also got the highest rate of species depletion in the shortest space of time. Mammals. This is Victoria. This is a place we live. It's a fantastic place called Victoria, named after the Queen of England. You're head of state. Did you know this? You know that, I was going to ask you, put your hand up if you know who the head of state is here. Who would you have said? It's the Queen, people. The Queen is the head of this country. I don't deny this. But it's a fact. She's the head, and she's responsible for everything that goes on in this. Now, your Constitution, the 1901 Constitution, the full title of that thing is called the British Colony of Australia Constitution Act 1901. The British Colony of Australia Constitution Act 1901. It's all pretty clear. It's got to follow this legislative genocide of our people, starting from Terra Nullius, White Australia Only Policy Constitution, reservation laws, protection acts. Now, their idea of protection, no one protection from the state people tell you. Their idea of protecting people is put them in concentration camps, remove the children, starve them, put these diseases amongst them, and hope for them to die out. Outside our line. That was the idea of these concentration camps. So this lousy thing called Australia could grow. Well, I reckon it's just about had its day already. It's said it little 200 years. I reckon it's over already. Like I said, when you contemplate genocide, make sure you do it properly. Otherwise you're going to have trouble down the track. That's the way it is. Because we're not going to give up our land. We don't see Europeans as superior to us. Far from it. They've proven themselves. The way they look after country, the way they look after people. They're disgusting on every front. It's probably what you get from a convict penal colony. It's manifested out of this. You know, Botany Bay was similar to Guantanamo Bay. A hell of a lot worse, actually. And it's manifested from this convict penal colony. Totally overgoverned. You've got the Crown and the Commonwealth, the state, and the local government. You've got all those of lard-ass, useless bureaucrats you're paying taxes to. Come on, people, wake up. Don't need that shit. What do you even need a government for? Can't just manage your own affairs. I thought you were all educated. You know, it's time to stand up. It really is. You know, colonisers, the West, is devouring the earth. And it's noticed. They're digging up everything. They need it to sustain their bullshit and their power. And they're just robbing all the Indigenous people around the world. So, you know, these governments, to me, are just a front for these multinational mining companies. That's all they are. People stand up. We get a just cause. You stand behind Aboriginal people. You can stand up to their courts, anybody, any of their law. We've got a just cause. Legal, sound legal argument. All we need is the people behind us. I don't know if you noticed around other sides of the world, they're tearing down the symbols of imperialism and colonialism and stomping on it. What? Why don't we have Aboriginal Spring here? That's what we need to happen. We need to be tearing down all these symbols of imperialism and colonialism. Was that the way you want it to be? Like you want to be an independent, free nation. You know the way to become an independent, free nation? There. That's how you do it. You know why it's called the Republic of the United States of America? Because when they booted the Crown out in 1776, they done treaties with the first people. Moral America, when it comes to Australia. You've got a legal foundation, even though they're bullshit treaties and they're being done on them. Still a legal foundation there. Here, Terra Nullius. And then you've got this imposed, convoluted, complex thing called native title, which is racist in the extreme. When the High Court removed native title, terra nullius, that was the legal foundation of this country. Where did the High Court get the right to determine the title, the entitlements of the original people then, after they removed their basis of jurisdiction? This is where it's wrong at law. They had no jurisdiction to determine what our title was. We're a sovereignty here. So you have the white fellas to demonstrate how they're connected to this land. And if you can prove that to the black sovereigns, then we're prepared to recognise some form of domestic native title under our sovereignty. Make sense? Or what, we're nothing, right? We've got no human rights out here. And because we've got none, you've got none. That's the catch-22. You don't want to recognise our human rights? You just won't have any. You've got these bullshit charters that are just sort of popping up now. They're dodgy. Victoria got one about 2 to 3 years ago. Canberra got one. I think they're adding to places where there's human rights lawyers, and they're not the full clear either. So it's in the interest of the people to recognise the human rights of the original people in this country. But it ultimately affects your human rights. And if you think that's important, well, support us on it. And that's what we've been arguing for. Our people have been destitute. We've been decimated in this country. But we're not going to give up. You might as well kill us all. We don't want to be like you. Why, what blackfellow in their right mind would want to be like a European? They've got nothing to offer out. They've brought nothing to this country. Other than an orange. There's hardly anything that you can tell me that we would want. Now, when Cook came on the beach down there in 90 Mile, my people seen Lieutenant Cook, he wasn't a captain, he was a lieutenant. He came around onto the 90 Mile beach, Croatoan, my people seen him. And he was using his cannons, so we knew what their intent was. We get fires all along the coast, so he kept going north, forced him north. But we knew what their intent was there. And it still is the same intent. And we've got to have a treaty. That changes the whole fabric of this country, changes the law. You haven't got a proper legal foundation other than you impose colonisers' law there. What? There's none of our law in that mix, is there? We want a treaty. We don't need dark age garbage determining our rights in this country. We haven't got a right even to be in the country in the first place. I'm challenging us all. You haven't got a right to be here. You're illegally occupying our land. The day will come when we're going to get support to remove this. It'll come. And we remember the crimes you committed against our people. So we should be healing our people right now. Should be doing it right now. There's no time to waste people. And what happens when you get these Mickey Mouse certificates from education? Now, my people went into these places. And a lot of, even Gary Foley and others said this, that they were going to go and get an education and go back and help liberate their people. Well, that don't happen, people. They come into these places and they're lost to our people. In fact, they become enemies of our people. They're used against our people. I'm not saying Foley's like that. He's one of the rare exceptions. Most of these blackfellas, you ride on the back, you don't identify really. You use a drop of their, say you've got a drop of Aboriginal blood, my great granny had a bit of blood, and that justifies their Aboriginality. They get these scholarships and they use it. That's meaningless. In the meantime, Aboriginal people are missing out big time in education. If you look at the statistical information on Victoria's Aboriginal education, that's a disgrace. It's disgusting. It's all by design. The problem is they're using blacks to do it now. Blacks who work for the government are black gubbars. Because the word gubbar, you ever heard the word gubbar? I'm a Koori. You gubbars. there's any crew for it. Use a gubbar. You know what gubbar means? Government. We didn't have V in our name. Government. Gubbars. Everyone was gubbars. Now we've got blacks who work for the government. They're black gubbars. It's not about colour. It's important that there's two types of black holes. The ones that work for the government, the ones that don't. And 99% of the people who work for the government in our communities. All those jobs are government. There's hardly any independent Aboriginal people out there. You know any? They've got their own businesses, running their own business. Very rare. So, this problem of getting a job in this country that's relevant, culturally relevant, and meaningful for Aboriginal people it's non-existent. You know, we're quite capable, but we don't want to assimilate. And it's probably the worst form of genocide of assimilation, as far as I'm concerned. It's happened to be like someone who detests most like on earth. So that's really hard to take. I'd rather be dead than anything, or I'd be fighting. I'll never accept it. And I don't think anybody who comes here as an immigrant should assimilate into this convict penal colony mentality either. Stand up, people. You've got a just cause. All you've got to say is, this is like the land. When you phone up to the judge, you say, excuse me, I thought this was the Wurundjeri land, not yours. Wurundjeri or Woiwurrung, whatever the name is. Barrung. I think this is Barrung here, is it? Wurundjeri. So this has already got a name, this land, and it's got a law. If you want to call yourself a part of this country, come under the law. Come to our custom. Quite welcome, come in there. And we expect people to behave in that way. That's the way Irish people used to operate in the past. We respect other people's territories. And we move through their country with respect. You soon knew about it if you didn't. Everyone operated. You know, we had a stable, socially organised society, and we had that for a long time. And we weren't working 8 hours a day like the slaves do today. What the hell is that about? 8 hours. Is that some sort of victory for people? Jesus. Slaves, still slaves, it's fancy slaves, people. You know what I mean? They still had their lives, we didn't have to work out. The whole country was like a supermarket for us, a chemist. We knew where everything was. We knew how the seasons changed, when the food was ready. That's all gone now. You're never going to get that back. We had a quality of life and a standard of living that will never ever be achieved on this planet ever again. Thanks to colonialism and their superior way of farming and all their superior ways to us. It's all an illusion, people. It's all lies, deceit, propaganda, and indoctrination. Australia's a crime scene. It's a criminal nation. And we want a crime scene investigation. Simple as that. And that requires support for the International Criminal Court of Justice. Recently, Desmond Tutu was called for the trial of Tony Blair and George Bush. There's another bloke who should be in that mix. Who is he? John Howard, who before Tony Blair put his hand up to join the coalition against evil, John Howard did. He was in there before Bush, Blair. He was probably encouraged England to join in the fray too. So if John Howard gets charged in the International Criminal Court, everything that he's done in this country falls away. The refugees, the Pacific Solution stuff, the 10-point plan, where he stripped away all the rights of the Aboriginal people, native titles exploited punishment in the first place. And then the Liberal Party stripped it bare. Bucket loads of extinguishers that come out saying that. This was meant to be justice for the Aboriginal people after 200 years of of the genocide. This is meant to be an end of that, and they were going to recognise some sort of justice for Aboriginal people. Native title. This happened to be the lowest form of title in the regime of titles. Australia works on a thing called Torrens title. We all know this, don't we? Torrens title. It's one other place in the world where Torrens title exists. Have a guess where it is? South Africa. I hope you're all feeling really proud about the beautiful country Australia is. Because it's a disgusting, vile place it is. No, I can't understand if you walk past Aboriginal people in this country. When I'm walking down the street, white people won't look in on. They won't look in on. It's a shame. Particularly the old white Australians, you know. It's not so much the newer ones. They don't know what's going on. But the white Australians, they haven't got a relationship with our people. They never have that. There's a deep-seated hatred for our people. That's why they're crucifying us. That's why they're killing us. Sorry for being so slow, I'm just all over the place now. But what I would like to see happen is we get support. We charge Howard in International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. I charged him in '96, asking for an international opinion on why Australia is not subject to international convention laws, namely the Genocide Convention. Notice how Australia, when they view our people, they suspend the Race Discrimination Act, another international convention. The rights of a child. How children, there's no rights for children's crimes. That convention are shit creek too. And so is the one for refugees. At the same time, Australia is looking to get on this the Security Council. We're not done yet. So there's a campaign around there, isn't there? How can Australia possibly justify being on the United Nations Security Council? Whatever that's worth. I've got no faith in the United Nations either. And the reasons for that is, back in 1949, I think that's when the Liberal Party began. I'm not sure about that. That when the Liberal Party began in 1949, that's after the Second World War. After the Second World War, they said that this sort of crime should never happen. They created the Convention for the Prevention and the Punishment of Genocide, the crime of genocide. Herbert Evatt, a well-known Australian lawyer at the time, sat and headed that committee. They created the United Nations Human Rights Charter and all those things. Now, when it came time for Australia to legislate against the crime of genocide, you can look at this in the Hansard. You should read the Hansard on the ratification debate of the Genocide Convention in 1949, the beginning of the Liberal Party. They decided that we'll put that one in the too hard basket. They ratified it. They never legislated, never made it a crime in this country. They went on to remove our children, create the conditions of life with the intent to destroy, sterilised our people, removed our children, and committed all sorts of crimes, physical tortures and created the conditions of life. So everything that was defined as genocide in that convention, the UN Convention, Australia's guilty. There's no doubt about it. And the fact that they never had a law to prevent genocide in this country means they failed to prevent genocide. Does that make sense? Your country never prevented genocide, despite the fact that the United Nations and the rest of the world adopted this convention and legislated it. It seems like there's a conspiracy between the United Nations and Australia. And at the same time, the Liberal Party realised that if they recognise the rights of the Aboriginal people, where's our wealth going to be coming from? How are we going to rate that land? That's why they never did it. And this is where the wealth of the Liberal Party's come from. failing to recognise the most fundamental and basic human rights of our people. This whole country lives on it, and Labor Party is worse. I don't understand the political system here. You're talking about the same people. In fact, I agree with Frye, the Labor Party is worse than the Liberal Party. We prefer to work with an overt racist than a covert racist. The overt racist, you understand, you can deal with it. But the Labor Party makes out with your friends. It's in this year, going to do all sorts of and that's I find them far worse. So, like, go on.
Well, we probably have about 5 minutes before, but I think there might be another class coming in. Yeah, so just let you know.
I'll just finish and I'll give a chance for 5 minutes of questions as well. So, some embassy, it took a lot for those young men to be able to go out there and sit in front of that Parliament House. It's an occupation. It's the oldest occupation on the planet. 40 years sitting in front of the Parliament. And I was looking for something that was relevant to me. When I went to the embassy, that changed my world. And I've been involved ever since. And I was involved at the Commonwealth Games in 1982, which is there's a film on at Mesa this weekend, that protest. It's an unseen film. A lot of the people from Victoria were featuring that because we were there. I was there, and a number of people my age were there. But that's why the embassy's there to make the point that we're not going away until we get our rights recognised. And they're really staunch about the idea of sovereignty. Right? They're not moving. So it's going to have to be recognised sooner or later. This is not the Queen's land. That's the North. It's in Victoria. This land belongs to us. It needs to be recognised. We need to justify the occupation. And we're going to keep pushing the idea of sovereignty. Our law, our land. Our land, our law. It can't be our land and somebody else can't do it. That's not property law. It doesn't work like that. Our land, our law. That's sovereignty. Genocide, guilty on all counts, as far as the United Nations Convention is concerned. Failed to prevent it since 1949. No treaty, no basis, no right to occupy this sacred land. Got no consent, and you've got no jurisdiction. Like GST. Needs to be resolved. The fundamental legal questions of international law need to be resolved. We need the support of the conscientious Australians behind us. Start paying rent, justify the occupation, can be a token amount. But we'll simply go and cap in hand to fascist, racist, genocidal pigs for our existence here in this country. And they starve us, they divide us, they do all sorts of things. For us to get a government grant, we've got to jump through about 10 more hoops than the average white Australian's got to jump through. And then it's not worth getting. I refuse to take it. I want rent money from the conscientious Australians. And we'll bury people like Howard, the Crown, the Commonwealth, and the state with genocide, because that's what we're guilty of. We need the people to back us up. We've got the lawyers, we've got the people who can aid in this. Okay? And it's true. We win this, and we need to put it up. That's what Treaty Republic's about. And, do yourself a favour, people. Legitimise your occupation of this land and start to feel a part of this land. If you really want to take on this system, join with us. We're veterans in this war, and we've got a just cause. So stand with us, and we'll make a brand new day for everyone. We want a constitution for the people, by the people, protects people and this land. We haven't got that at the moment. We've got some foreign pockets. Anyway, thanks for that.